Destiny, remember this discussion we're having? Oh shit, did Uber do it? Oh no, Uber said that... Hey, I use Uber. I can participate in this. I'll boycott Uber. There we go. Whew. Oh man, dude. I feel like a real activist. Deleting an app on my phone feels good, man. Into the uninstalled trash can you go. Whoa! Fucking got him. I stand with the people gathered across the country tonight defending our values and our constitution. This is not who we are. Fucking Hillary. Isn't Hillary a lawyer? How sick would it have looked for her to have gone down to like an airport and offered people like free consultation or whatever? Or maybe she's not allowed to do that? Maybe she wouldn't be allowed to? I don't actually know. It would look really good. Yo, I added you, dude. Whenever, I don't know, you haven't accepted. I'm just waiting for you to accept, but I already added you. Destiny, I do disagree that the U.S. has no cultural identity. There are many things unique to the U.S. compared to European countries and stuff. Yeah, there is, but culture, like, culture is an evolving and changing thing. This idea that you want to make culture a museum and pretend that it's never going to change again, like, is just really naive. It shows that you're insanely fucking ignorant about where everything came from. None of your culture is unique, especially if you're a fucking American, dog. You have no culture that you invented or created on your own. Like, this is all, like, heavily borrowed stuff from other people. Your culture is constantly changing and constantly evolving. Could you imagine? These are the type of people that want you to use damn Daniel memes for your entire life, right? Or want you to use the same, remember fucking Icon Has Cheeseburger? Imagine if these people were in charge of the meme economy and they said they don't want the culture to change. We need to respect our culture and not let any new memes in. And we were constantly talking about the Icon Has Cheeseburgers cat for the rest of our fucking lives, dude. That's not how culture works. Damn, I wonder how many people in my chat don't even know what Icon Has Cheeseburgers is. Oh, shit. There might be people that actually don't. Can you imagine if we had to watch Homestar Runner cartoons every single day, guys? Can you imagine if we had to go to fucking E-Bomb's world for all of our fucking memes? If every meme had to be formatted on a You're the Man Now Dog website? That would be fucking horrible, dude. I'm waiting for this guy to add me on Skype, and then we're going into the memes, boys.
Now that I'm banned from entering the US, will you hold fan meetings in Canada from now on? The feels bonus meme, ye peppy ye.
$20,400 followers, boys. Oh, fuck, wait, never mind. Hold on, my last tweet was autism. Never mind. Forget that shit. Never mind. Oh, fuck, my last tweet was autistic as fuck. We were too eager. I take back all my Uber hate. I'm sorry. Hey, there's nothing wrong with people saying they want to work with Trump. I don't understand why people are, I don't understand why people get so upset about that. I mean, I would rather have Elon working with Trump than, I would rather have Elon or Uber or whatever working with Trump than just staying out of the administration completely. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Culture isn't going anywhere. Globalization isn't objectively good. Globalization is objectively good in several means. Cats, I can't believe that you're the one that would say that. You run an international esports team. You're not an American. You weren't an American-born citizen. You literally traveled to this country on an easy visa to come and work here. You bring players in from all around the world to work on a broadcast platform that has data centers that are distributed all around the world so that people all around the world can watch. People from all around the world donated to your organization to help you so that you could fly your players all around the world to compete in esports tournaments that are broadcasted to people from all around the world, that is created by a company with employees from all around the world. How can somebody working in esports say that globalization is not objectively good? Our entire lives are owed to the fact that globalization exists. What? No way. Oh, I shouldn't have deleted my last tweet. I should have looked it up so people knew what we were talking about. I'm sorry. Oh, fuck, because I never delete my tweets, but now I deleted a tweet. Fuck! All around the world. What did the tweet say? Oh, I said I was going to uninstall Uber because I thought when I read the dude's tweet, it looked like the CEO wanted to strike break, but I totally fucking read it wrong, and I shouldn't have. I jumped the gun, boys. We took our activism too far. I'll reinstall Uber tonight. Don't worry. My bad. There's a difference between globalization and here's 15 pictures that will make you go fuck borders and law and shit. Yeah, but that's the argument that the alt-right retards put out. No major figure on the left is advocating for just open borders and let in infinite amounts of people and all sorts of crime and law and blah, 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 blah. If I heard everybody on the alt-right saying things like, we need to rethink our immigration policy, we need to be a little bit more sane about who comes in and goes, maybe we need to, then yeah, I would be more sympathetic to that movement. But when the conversation is, we need to ban all Muslims from coming into the country, we need to deport deport all fucking Mexicans from our country. Like, we need to build a giant fucking wall to the south of our country. Like, this is autism. This is fantasy land. These are people that are uneducated, have no idea what they're talking about, but feel strongly enough to express their opinions on Twitter, but more often than not on Skype. But yeah, these are not people that I don't know why the fuck Bannon is going into the national security conference or whatever the fuck. I don't know, dude. I don't know anything anymore. Is this guy gonna fucking add me?
Isn't Western culture unique to USA and Mexico? It's pretty dank.
Why the fuck is it so hard for people to add me on Skype sometimes? Oh, nice. Oof. So Canadians are going to be allowed in now, too? How much of this do you think they're going to walk back? Oh, it worked. I think when you clarify, you need to clarify when you say uneducated, but you mean people that cannot think critically, because many people interpret being uneducated as not having passed elementary school type thing. Oh, well, I mean, I think they're both. I mean, largely more college-educated people tend to vote Democrat versus Republican. But yeah, uneducated is in lacking critical thinking as well. Yeah, sure. All right, boys. We're going in. Good luck. Oh, shit.
Hey.
Are you ready, buddy?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, how's it going?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good.
All right, so let's frame the discussion. You seem to think that Islamic people are represent a grave threat to the United States?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell me ways today in which the United States is threatened by Islam?
Well, let me preface it. I had watched your video. I believe it was the Islam in the U.S. or something. It was one of your recent videos.
Sure.
I think you had two on YouTube that was regarding Islam specifically. But the claim, I mean, you had made a claim that Islam, that not being an issue in the U.S. because the statistics you bring up solely looked at the violence on U.S. soil. And the idea that a toxic ideology that exists outside of the U.S. has no effect on the United States because of that is a little bit absurd.
Okay, can you tell me which ways that the toxic ideology of Islam has an impact on the United States?
Sure. I mean, one of the biggest things that you'll learn in geopolitics is purely influence. Right. We have an obligation, just looking at our military specifically, we sort of have an obligation. I mean, I don't know if you consider them to be accounted for in what you said before. But yeah, no, our military is one of the biggest issues right now that we're facing on a daily basis, the Islamic terrorism.
Okay. Wait, you're saying that Islamic terrorism is a threat because our military is invading other countries that has Islamic terrorists? I feel like this is a little bit backwards rationale. Like, what?
No, well, you made that implication.
Explain to me, because I asked you how Islamic terrorism or the ideology thereof is a threat to the United States, and you said our military. So I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean.
Sure. Well, I mean, we have a lot of obligations right now and I'm sure you're aware of. That we have to sort of step in, and unfortunately, we are playing the role right now as the world police. But the fact of the matter is, the threat that we're facing right now, our military, it's Islamic extremism.
Okay, where in the world are we being forced to step in to fight Islamic extremism?
Everywhere we have thus far.
So you're talking about when we decided to go into Iraq and depose Saddam? Are you talking about when we decided to go into Libya and get rid of Gaddafi? Are you talking about when we decided to try to go into Syria and get rid of Assad? Are you trying to talk about the Iranian Revolution? Which one are you talking about?
Sure. There's a case.
So when we choose to go overseas and fuck with democracies or fuck with elected leaders and then depose them, that's Islam's fault then?
In a sense, yeah, because that ideology is spreading. It's a viral ideology. I believe the number right now is somewhere between 600 and 800 million radical Muslims currently live in the world right now.
Why is it that there aren't 800 million radical Muslims committing terrorist attacks if there are 800 million of them?
What?
You just said 800 million radical Muslims commit terrorist or are radicalized. Why aren't they all committing terrorist attacks?
What is the the claim that 800 million radical Muslims, that doesn't mean 800 million of them are all going to commit terrorist attacks.
So what does that mean?
Well, let's define radical.
I know what radical is. Radical is what you read on the Pew Research poll that says a lot of people believe in apostasy. I don't care about that. I'm asking you how many Muslims are going to commit terrorist attacks, because we're talking about terrorism, not how many people are radicalized or whatever vague bullshit that means. Because I'm asking about threats to the United States, not what people said in a Pew Research poll. So if you said there are 600 to 800 million radicalized Muslims, why aren't there like terrorist attacks representing it? Maybe how radicalized somebody is or whatever isn't really that relevant to a discussion?
No, it certainly is.
Okay.
The Pew Research poll that you were talking about that you kind of shrugged off, I don't understand why you're kind of
because I'm asking you about impact. I'm not because it doesn't mean anything. It's just a stat in a vacuum. If you spend any time in it doesn't impact like things happening like in
deaths?
reality. Yeah, sure, deaths or terrorism. Yeah, impact. Yes.
It's not as simple as looking at a piece of paper and
I agree. It's not as simple.
Yes. Okay, so my point that I'm making is that because it exists outside of the U.S., there are other ways than just killing United States citizens that it can affect us.
Okay, what other ways can it affect us? Are there countries that have put massive sanctions on the United States because of Islam?
No,
are there countries that have refused trade with the United States because of Islam? Because you said economic, so I'm trying to figure out what economic reasons you're talking about.
It's all 100% of the points I'm making right now. I mean, those are separate arguments, but 100% of the points I'm making right now are related to strategic and military.
Okay, so the way that we framed this initially was you're claiming that Islam is harming the United States, and you're using this like really, really roundabout method, and you're struggling to find a single way it is when you tell me that they're a bigger threat or one of the largest threats to the United States. It seems like this should be really easy to define. If it's such a massive threat to the United States, why do you have to reach so hard? Why not?
It shouldn't be easy. Why do you have to? There's way too many variables involved. When you're talking about problems that we face in the United States, economic. I mean, I'm not going to be able to pinpoint every single economic issue. I'm not
asking you to pinpoint every single one. I'm just asking you to pinpoint one. You said that Islam, extremist Islam or whatever, was a massive threat to the United States, and I'm trying to find examples of how it's a threat. Because as an American that's not an idiot, I don't feel very threatened.
No, I gave you the example of our military right now. I mean, you can debate the viability of our strategy.
Was Pearl Harbor committed by Islam people? Where is this massive threat to our military from Islam extremists? It's not the air raids that we're doing.
What?
Where has our military threatened right now by Islamic extremism?
Everywhere that our active duty soldiers and Marines are being deployed.
Okay, so first of all, so you're talking about...
You understand, well, okay. First of all, right, we basically have a network, right? We have a really, really good understanding of what's going on around the world because of our military. In order for that to have ever been a possibility, we needed to, and I mean, this is a separate discussion and also outside of my pay grade, but regardless, in order for us to have the knowledge and security that we have today, right, there needed to be the invasions, there needed to be several different steps that took place that could only have unfolded through the threat of Islamic terrorism.
What, like
So you can
what?
call it-
Name one or two. What name some of these? Because most of our I'm sorry, hold on.
I'm
Most
sorry.
of our international intelligence today probably has way more to do with the Cold War than anything having to do with Islamic extremism. We literally funded people like the Al Mujahideen or whatever
Why
because
do you
we
think
were.
that?
What do you mean? What? Because the entire existence of NATO isn't because of Islamic extremism. It's because of Russia or the Soviet Union.
Okay, I'm right. I'm talking about our current network that we have in the Middle East.
Okay, what about I'm sorry. What about our network in the Middle East?
I'm saying that a lot of the. Let me back up. A lot of, or sorry, let me rephrase rather.
Hold on. Actually, wait.
Um,
Can I ask you a question? Just because I can leave this. Why do you think we're so interested in the Middle East?
Probably financial reasons.
Okay, and because of geopolitical, because of geographical locations related to Russia. That's why we're so interested in the Middle East. It has nothing to do with Islamic terrorism. When you look at our military,
Wait, I'm sorry. Say that again. I'm sorry, I missed that.
geographical superiority concerning Russia or geographical strategic positioning concerning Russia is our main interest in things in places like Syria.
That's an assumption, but okay.
It's not an. I'm sorry. It's not an
That
assumption.
is an assumption.
Russia has
That's
two
literally
warm
an
water
assumption.
ports, okay? The only one leading out to the Mediterranean is that port in Syria. I don't remember the name. The Targon, I think, the port in Syria, is one of Russia's only two warm water ports. This is why Putin is so massively concerned with holding on to that area. Why do you think Russia and China have banded together?
No. That's I'm not contesting that. I'm not debating that. Sure, I agree with that 100%. I don't understand.
Wait,
how
then
that
what did you
contradicts.
disagree with that I just said? I'm telling you that
I-
our interest
sorry,
in the Middle
I-
East,
I
we're not
thought you
going
had-
over there to rid the world of Islamic terrorism. This is why we don't go to Africa to get rid of Islamic terrorism. We don't care about Islamic terrorism. We care about
Yeah,
strategic
no, we don't
positions
give a shit about
related.
it. That's not.
Well,
Yeah,
but you
I
just said
agree
that
with
our primary
100%.
reason for being over there and all of our military was owed to Islamic terrorism, and now you just said we don't give a shit about it. So which one is it?
No, that's what we use specifically as the catalyst to go into there. I'm not saying that
Oh,
the
TARDIS,
lawmakers
I'm
who are making us go into there specifically give a shit. I'm not. That wasn't. I never made that.
Okay, so how does Islamic terrorism force us to grow a military network in these parts of the world?
Force us to grow a military network in this part of the world?
That was your argument, wasn't it? Or am I wrong?
Sure. No. We definitely use it as a reason for it. I'm not saying that's necessarily a good reason. But you can't deny that the reason we gave everybody for going into Iraq was to
Yes,
get
this
rid
is the
of
American
Islamic
people
terror.
being duped. This isn't the actual reasons why we go there. But that was my whole argument in the
Right.
first place. The only reason why this terrorism is a threat is because people get so hung up on it. But in actuality, it really isn't that big of a threat.
No, it really is, and I'm
Okay,
arguing
but I'm asking you to
that on
argue
separate-
why. You haven't made any arguments for it.
The ideology, 100%. It's a viral ideology. It's
If it's so viral, then
spreading.
why aren't fucking Muslim ideologies taking control all over the world?
That's why I asked you initially to define radicalized Islam.
Okay, I'm
You kind of shrugged off the Pew polls, but that's pretty significant numbers.
How do
that
the
show
Pew
that
polls
the
manifest
vast
themselves?
majority-
Has any place in the United States voted for Sharia law?
Yes. Are you saying actually enacted
Yeah.
Sharia law? No, of course not.
Okay, so I'm trying to find the threat to the United States.
Well, okay, you keep trying to simplify it, but let me attempt to simplify it.
Okay.
To kind of get my argument through. So let's say 5 years ago, you look at the statistics and radicalized, according to the Pew polls or whatever statistics you want to look at, what you would consider radicalized Islam was maybe 10% of the current Muslim population. Right. 5 years later, you look back at you do the same polls, you do randomized, all the good stuff, and you find out that it's risen to 30%. Right. You check 5 years later, it's 55%. Check 5 years later, it's 60%. Are you gonna? Your argument is because they're currently not doing anything, they're currently not committing any acts of terrorism or killing any Americans, that's not an issue?
I mean, it might be an issue, but in terms of like represents a large, like listen to what you're saying. Like, well, what if there's an ideology and more people are starting to buy into it, but there aren't any terrorist attacks and there isn't anybody getting killed and there's no property being destroyed and there's nothing really happening, but these people all think these thoughts. Isn't that a problem? I mean, yeah, I guess it's kind of a problem, but nowhere near a large one. Like, yeah, it's something that would be addressed. Also, the problems that you're talking about could also be a little bit cyclical in nature as well. Like, where the reason why people become more radicalized is because people in the United States become more radicalized as well. Where we're saying fuck Islam, they're not allowed to build mosques here, cut off all borders. Like, I mean, this stuff also probably leads to radicalizing of people a bit as well. If it feels like the country you're in fucking hates you and wants to kick all of you out.
Definitely, no, I don't disagree with that. But I'm just refuting the claim you made initially, was that Islam is not a threat on U.S. soil, and I think that's
no. I mean, I'm sure it is to some extent, but if I were to name 10 issues facing the United States, I could find 10 in an instant that are more pressing than Islamic radical terrorism. Like, it's very, very, very small in the overall threat to our existence in the West.
Give it a shot. I don't think you can.
What, you want me to name 10?
I don't think you can name 5.
You don't think I could name 5?
No, I don't.
Okay, we'll try. I think that
we're talking about issues that we can actually actively fight against, first of all.
Okay, how many? I don't want to say economic issues because that's really broad, but there are tons of things in terms of our employment that could be acted upon, right? Do you think so? I think that there are a ton of economic issues that could be dealt with in the West, right? Maybe reforming some of our trade agreements if they're so bad, maybe doing something to help our manufacturing if that's possible, right? So there's like fucking 20 things already underlying there, right? I think that our immigration policy needs massive reform, all right? There's multiple issues there as well. We do need to do something with our border to the south. I don't know how we deal with that, right? But something has to happen. I think that our healthcare system is in shambles. That's something that absolutely needs to be addressed. The ACA is not helping prices, and when the Trumples fucking repeal it, who the fuck knows what's going to be there after that? Our education system is a fucking catastrophe. It's nothing to be proud of. We're falling behind in all these other European countries. Like, off the top of my head, those are 4 issues right there that are of paramount importance compared to fucking radical Islamic extremism. We can keep going. I gotta try environmental. Okay, hold on. Let me list these. So hold on. Wait, real fast. We have economic, immigration, healthcare, education, and I'll even throw climate change on there. Okay, these are 5 issues that I think are easily more pressing than terrorism. So let's start at the top. Economic issues. You think that dealing with radical Islamic what?
Radical Islamic extremism. I'm not saying terrorism.
Okay, radical. Okay, so how do you think that radical Islamic extremism is worse than the economic issues facing us today?
All of the above would be significantly easier to be solved. Well, they would be significantly easier to gain support. Right, they wouldn't be as held back if we didn't have, if we were a lot more secularized than we are right now. I mean, you would agree with that, and that's concerning Christianity. That's concerning every religion.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, going down the list, how does radical Islamic extremism keep us from making economic change in our country?
Economic change?
Yes.
Okay,
let's go down to the second.
I was focused on education.
Okay, we'll go down to education then. How can how does radical Islamic extremism negatively impact the education in the United States?
Well, you see, I'm going to bring up a different.
Nope, you have to answer this question. I can't let you keep hopping around a topic when you've lost, like every single time. You can tell me how radical Islamic extremism. What?
I'm not trying to hop around the topic.
Okay, then how does radical Islamic extremism impact education in the United States?
The way you phrase the question, though, if you were to phrase it like, how does a toxic...
Okay, how does a toxic ideology impact education in the United States?
If I were to ask you that on a separate day, I'm sure you'd be able to answer that.
I can tell you how Christianity affects education in the United States. Christians in a lot of places want to roll back Common Core. They're in favor of education, or they're in favor of homeschooling massively because of religious reasons. Christians also are in favor of teaching evolution in school instead of creationism. Christians are by far more in favor of local education because they can have more religious influence over what's being taught. So there's 3 issues right off the top of my head on how Christians impact education in the United States. So can you tell me how does Islam, radical Islamic extremism, impact negatively education in the United States?
How does the pursuit against science impact education in the United States?
Is that how you want to frame it? Then give me
Yeah,
examples
that's
of
how I wanna
Islamic
think.
people being against science in the United States, cutting scientific funding, right? These are usually Republicans that do these cuts in Congress. Like, which cuts to funding have Islam people made to scientific funding in the United States?
Do
Or
you want me
how
to
have they heard?
pinpoint a specific cut that
I want you to
you know,
pinpoint a
19
single thing.
1997. There was a.
So your
I don't
tweets
have
at me
everything- I
were
don't have everything
at
prepared
Omni
for you
Destiny.
specifically
You
to-
said you
to
don't have
bring up.
anything prepared. You
I'm
said
glad to bring that.
at Omni Destiny. Just watched your discussion on Islam versus Christianity in the U.S. You have a laughable understanding of geopolitics. At Omni Destiny, it's like this is your first day being involved with politics. LeMayo. At Omni Destiny, I wish you had the bullocks to debate someone with any critical thinking skills. At Omni Destiny, it's unfortunate you only choose to debate the lowest common denominators. Is that why I chose to debate you today? Because you don't seem to have a single thing to say on any of these issues. Yet you seem so willing to engage in like such insane fucking bants on Twitter. I don't understand why. You can't name me a
I've said a lot.
single. You haven't said anything. You haven't given me a single thing that Islam negatively impacts the United States. We can hit the other topics as well. How does Islam affect our healthcare in the United States? It doesn't,
if you'd
does
like,
it?
we can go in. We can Google these things, and I can prepare actual statistics for you. but
Okay,
that
they're
wasn't
not
what
going
I
to
was
find
getting
any
at.
statistics. Well, what are you getting at then?
Literally, the very first tweet you just read is what I was getting at.
The first tweet that you
The
said was
idea-
that the
the
majority
idea
of
that
our
an
meddling in the
ideology
Middle
outside of the
East.
US
The first thing you brought up was that meddling in the Middle East was done because of Islamic terrorism. That informs our foreign policy. When that's absolutely
No,
not true.
you
NATO
misunderstood.
informs our
That
foreign.
isn't.
That-
That's not what I said.
Okay, that sounded very much like what you said.
I
I'm pretty
thought
sure
we
you said we
agreed on
owe
that.
all of our intelligence in the Middle East to fighting Islamic terrorism. I thought you said that almost exactly.
No, if you were to remember, maybe 15 seconds after that, we had agreed that we were saying that no, the United States is using that specifically as a tool to get us in there. That's not necessarily right or wrong.
Okay, so let's back.
I
Okay,
wasn't
so let's
arguing
back up
whether or not that
all
was
the way.
actual
Let's
reason
back
for us to
up.
be inside of there.
Okay, so I'll back all the way up, and I'll frame the question one more time. Can you name
And
me
that's a separate
way?
argument altogether.
Okay, so let's
Sure.
back all the way up to the initial question. Can you name me a way in which radical Islam, extremism, ideology, or whatever is a significant threat to the United States, more so than the 5 things that we named quickly on this list?
It's the fastest growing negative ideology we've ever seen thus far.
Fastest growing negative ideology we've ever seen thus far. How does this
ever
supposedly fastest negative ideology we've ever seen growing? How does this manifest itself as a threat
can
to the
get into
United
that.
States? How does it manifest itself as a
How
threat
does
to the
a
United
negative
States?
ideology manifest itself as a threat to the United States?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
That's a bit of a silly question.
Okay, why is it silly?
What if Nazism was manifesting itself in the United States?
Then it would probably
was
manifest itself
5%.
in the form of oppression of Jewish people, of policies trying to be passed that would oppress Jewish people, of Jewish people being murdered or killed in the streets. Like, I don't know, I can think of tons of ways that neo-Nazis could manifest themselves negatively in the United States.
That's not how it works. You don't just people who have law and order currently. I mean, the United States is pretty stable, one of the most stable countries, I would argue, in the world right now. So if you get an ideology that's manifesting itself, like you like to say, in the United States, it's not going to translate into a light switch. You know, tomorrow there's going to be beheadings in the street and Sharia law getting passed and all of these. That's not how it works.
Okay.
That's not how it works at all.
Okay, so how does it work? Give me like the doomsday scenario for Islam taking over the United States.
I never mentioned a doomsday scenario.
Can you give me the scenario in which this threat becomes
I
a thing?
I literally did.
Okay.
I said, listen, 10% of the people, right? 10 years ago. This is a very simplified version, and you have yet to give me a response to this one specifically. 10% of the people, say 15 years ago, believed in this really, really bad ideology. Let's just call it Islam, or let's just call it, X ideology, right? Mm-hmm. This X ideology, the majority of people approved of beheadings of people who left the religion. It approved of violence on women. It approved of everything in the book that you can think of that you would consider negatively or to be an ethical issue, right? Something that we wouldn't really stand for in the United States. 5 years later, it's 20%. 5 years later, it's 30%. 5 years later, eventually you get to the 60%.
Okay,
right?
what happens
when
at the 60%
do you start
mark?
actively pursuing?
What happens at the 60% mark?
No, I'm asking you a question. When do you start pursuing, right, any sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Any sort of not defense, but any sort of thing to combat that sort of ideology.
You don't, because this is the United States of America.
You never
You're free to
do.
practice whatever religion you want. It's in the Constitution. I'm sorry.
No, that's inherently incorrect. That the reason we have science in school is to essentially practice against this sort of ideology, right? This is the reason we have
Okay,
philosophy
what part of what I
classes at
just said? Wait, what
universities
part of
to
what
get
I just
people-
said? What part of what I just said was incorrect?
You don't. That was incorrect.
Okay, so I'm sorry. What are you
Ethically,
suggesting?
you do.
What are you
I'm sorry?
suggesting? So what is the way to combat it?
Well, we can get into that. Well, first you have to. I mean, I
Oh,
think
wait,
Hillary
how is
did
this even the
horrible
fastest growing
example.
ideology? Hasn't Islam been around for like fucking 2,000 years? It's had a lot of time to fucking grow. It seems like it's taken a while, dude.
No, Islamic extremism in its current state was maybe 55 years.
What do you mean in
The-
its
the
current
Islamic
state? Are you telling me
extremism
that
we
Muslims
know.
have never been fucking crazy before? Didn't they used to sack cities and go on fucking crusades and shit?
Oh, definitely, but not in the developed world, right? Not.
What do you mean not in the developed world for the time? Yeah, of course.
Okay, so pre 1950s, give me an example of Islamic terrorism, extremism, running cities and right beheading mass people.
Pre-1950s?
Yeah,
What wasn't the entire fucking
you're gonna have to stretch back pretty far for that one, right?
my history is pretty bad, but I know that Islam has been involved in a lot of different religious conflict over the years. I'm trying to see what I know of the Armenian genocide. I don't know if I can really pin that on Islam or not, but I mean that was pretty bad, and I think that Turkey was Muslim majority at the time. Does the Armenian genocide count?
I'm sorry, you cut out.
Does
cut
the
out-
Armenian
say that
genocide
again?
count? Can I say that or?
Oh, I guess yeah, I guess that would count. I would actually consider that less to be that definitely counts. So I would actually readjust that to pre 1915, right?
Okay. I don't know, dude.
I mean, I'm sorry, I missed the Armenian genocide. I wasn't really thinking about that one. I had to make up a number on the spot, but
I'm pretty
you
sure
get
that
my
I can
point,
find
though.
something in the list. No, what is your point? Is that you just fucking grabbed the goalpost and ran it down another 20 years? Come on, dude. I'm sure something happened in the 1900s or the late 1800s that involved Islam fucking fighting somewhere and whatnot. Like, people fight all the fucking time. I don't think that, I mean, Islam has had fucking over 1,500 years.
Not nearly on the scale. Even the Armenian genocide.
Not on
nearly
the scale? Islam
being-
isn't doing anything on the scale, dude. It's fucking nothing. ISIS is fucking shit. They have nothing. What do you mean?
Islamic extremism isn't doing anything right now in the world.
On a scale? No, of course not.
What?
Give me an example
maybe
of
I'm-
massive amounts of attacks. Give me an example. What do you mean by what are they doing on a scale right now?
I mean, if you just open up a newspaper and look at anything going on right now in the Middle East, that's going to be motivated.
You said in the
through
world. I'm
Islamic-
not asking in the Middle East. I'm talking about in the world. What is Islamic terrorism doing all over the world? Aside from
maybe
like
I'm not. The
what?
Middle East is the world.
Okay, so then the question isn't Islamic extremism a threat to the world? Is it a threat to the Middle East? Is that what we want to make the new question? Because the question was initially about America. Now I've opened it up to all around the world, and now you want to center it around the Middle East?
What are you talking about? Yes, the Middle East it does exist in the world. Destiny. Yes, that was the point I was.
We're not
making.
asking if it exists in the world. If I ask you if your body is covered in third-degree burns, and you say, yes, it is, and I say, oh my God, where? And you say, well, look, a little bit on my finger. And I go, what the fuck? And you go, well, my finger is on my body, dude, obviously. Like, what the fuck? That
What
doesn't
is
make
this
sense.
analogy?
We're
asking
having a
where
question
this
about
exists
whether or
in
not
the world. I'm
Islamic
telling you the
terrorism
Middle
is a
East.
threat to the entire world. It was America specifically. Then we brought it to the entire world. And now you're saying, well, it is a threat in the Middle East. The Middle East is not the entire world. Just because something is contained in something
first of
doesn't
all-
make it everything. Like, what do
Okay.
you...
Are you finished? First of all, I never said the entire world.
I don't know what we're talking about. I'm sorry. Can you reframe the original question? Because now I don't know what we're talking about anymore. I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about the entire world, but I guess we're not.
No. Well, you asked me. Where is it a problem right now in the current world?
I
in
said
the world,
around.
right.
Okay, so now we want so
Or no, maybe you said around the world, right?
because you were talking about a
said
threat
the
to
Middle East.
civilized society and shit. So I assumed that we were talking about like the Western world. But so, what is the conversation topic now? Because I'm totally lost. Now we're asking
no,
if Islamic
I-
extremism
that's-
is a threat to the Middle East.
No, I think that's a given. I think we can agree on that one specifically. That what we're arguing is whether or not it's a threat in the United States.
Okay.
You
so-
asked me to give an example of
And it's a
of
threat in the
rampant
United States.
ideology.
because it's 5%, 10%, 15%, and then up to 100%. That's the threat to the United States.
Yes.
Okay. But you can't give me any ways in which it currently manifests itself as negative to the United States whatsoever.
Yeah, no, the polls that you had mentioned in the beginning, that's literally what I was going to give you. That's all I needed.
That's all anybody ever has. Does that ever make you nervous that when you guys are all like running around like talking about these issues, like you always like, well, look at the Pew polls, and that's like the only thing you have to back your shit up? Does that ever bother you?
I don't. What do you mean, you people? No.
When you bring up the idea that 800 million Islamic people are radicalized, but you can't point to anything going on with all of these people, like that doesn't bother you at all? Like, doesn't it make you stop and think, like, well, fuck, maybe it's a little bit more complicated than just like polling on a question about apostasy?
We can get into the variables behind that. Why you're not seeing it manifest itself in actual physical violence in the United States?
Okay, why doesn't it manifest itself in actual physical violence in the United States?
I would say it mostly has to do with the laws we currently have. That it's very, very difficult. Aside from an entire political collapse, for something like that to take over. You keep saying, right? It doesn't necessarily have to take over, in my opinion, for it to be a serious issue.
Okay, so how do you combat this issue?
Specifically in education.
Okay, so how do you combat this issue?
I think the policymakers, the politicians, need to basically call it for what it is. I think you specifically, everybody, right? All liberals or whatever labels you want to give them. I think if you just look at the stats, if you look at the polls, and I guess it's a joke to look at the polls, but if you were to look at what these people are actually saying, right? They believe if you get a 50,000 person poll, 49,999 of them are saying we think beheading babies is okay. That's obviously drastically exaggerated, but then you would say, holy shit, this is really bad. So my question to you initially was, at what point do you take those polls into consideration and say, okay, maybe we need to actively do something?
Okay, so I'm asking you, what do we actively do about it? Can you give me a single example of what you would actively do about it?
Yeah, no, I think perception in this specific instance, perception is the biggest thing. Meaning, I think it's
ask him what happens when Islamic extremism reaches 60%. What deaths
Muslims in general
from the past make him think something will suddenly happen? How is that percentage
the toxicity
changed?
behind the ideologies that people believe in?
Because there have
what I mean by that is
in recent years,
people like you, people like policymakers,
like the AI guy,
public figures, who do
okay,
believe
hold on.
in.
Before you talk for like 20 minutes, so do you have an answer for that question? What do you do? So you call it radical Islam extremism. That's what you do? That's how you combat it, is by calling it that?
That's the first step, yeah.
Okay, what's the next step? I want to know something that you actually do. Like, I want an example of something you actually do, not like say mean words on InfoWars. Like, what's something you actually do? Like, say, what's a policy decision?
Words on InfoWars. That's
okay. What's a policy decision that you do? Why have we had millions of people in the United States for like years and years and years, and they haven't all grown into this? Like, at what magical point do they like take over the country? Like, I don't know. It's just I see Christians as a threat.
It's a recent phenomenon. If you've tracked it, it's a recent phenomenon. The radicalized Muslim presence in the United States. It's not exactly sure. We've been around for so long, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Muslim extremism in its current state has been around for that long, right? It's our current involvement militarily and strategically in the United States, or sorry, in the Middle East, is obviously spurring that to a large extent, and obviously disagree with. I haven't gotten into my personal views on any of this thus far. I know you keep grouping me into these people, InfoWars and these other people, but no, I think. First of all, I'm obviously not a policymaker, so I couldn't give you an exact policy to enact. It's not that easy. But first and foremost, you need to have a perception shift. You need to have a public understanding that,
okay,
yes.
But you just said that we have a public understanding. That's why people don't behead each other. We have laws. We agree that there are some things that you shouldn't do. So I feel like we already have this public understanding.
No, What I mean by public understanding is our public understanding of that religion specifically.
What do you mean that religion? It's not that religion specifically. It's that religion radicalized specifically.
It's the religion specifically. I mean, I'm sure you can bring up a lot of balance from Christianity, but a lot of that's going to be inferred.
What? No, it's not. What do you mean inferred?
From the New Testament?
What do you mean? You're saying that I can't find negative actual text examples in Christianity of the Bible having fucked up shit in it?
Far less, yes. And you can't draw any direct lines. There's a lot of biblical scholars and Quran scholars, or theologists rather, who would argue that yes, that you can draw a direct line from what we're seeing right now in the Middle East to the text you can read about in the Quran.
You can draw a direct line to the shit that we do in the Middle East, to the direct line to the Bible. President Bush himself literally fucking said he praised to God before we went into Iraq.
I don't understand that.
What do you mean? He's Christian. What do you mean it's anecdotal? He said he's Christian. He prays to God to figure out what he wants to do.
So because one man prays to a Christian God for what
do you think that you don't think that 70% of Americans right now are Christian? You don't think that people's religions influence a fuck ton of what they do? Why do you think
somebody... That's not what you said. You said George W. Bush.
Okay, who was voted for by a ton of Christians that appreciate the fact that he's Christian. Do you think that when Trump got up and held up a Bible... Yeah, no, it's not, dude. What? Can you not say that? I mean, that's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. No, but what? I know, and I'm saying for the sake of the argument that what you're saying is actually fucking retarded. When Trump holds up a Bible and says this is the most important book in the world, do you think that he's just saying that because he personally feels that way, or he's pandering to an audience of people that are largely religious and feel very strongly about their religious conviction?
Certainly pandering to an audience, certainly.
Okay, so when Bush talks about praying to the boogeyman, God or whatever, about going to the Middle East, do you think he's just talking like very personally, or do you think he's talking about a message that resonates with a lot of his audience? Like, are you telling me?
Resonates with a decent amount, yeah.
Yeah, okay, a lot of people.
If you were to tell the United States we're going to the Middle East because of Christianity, no, I'm sorry, you're not going to get nearly as many people who are that hoorah about it.
Okay, they might not say because of Christianity, but when they say like we need to pray and figure out what is right and we need to do like blah blah blah, our country a Christian nation, blah blah blah, like these are all very religiously heavy thoughts.
What you're actually saying right now is you cannot draw a direct line. You drew one by giving George W. Bush as an example of him saying, you took a quote from him saying that because George W. Bush said that he prays before our invasion to Iraq, therefore, it was religiously motivated, but no.
Okay, so you're saying that if I go and read the Quran, I could find exact examples in the Quran of people suicide bombing themselves?
Of doing any means killing the infidels? Yes, you can.
Oh wow! Just killing the infidels? Because that's all over the Old Testament, dog. That's how early Christianity worked.
The Old Testament, yes. I'm not making. First of all, I never made the argument that Christianity was never a violent. In history.
It was, but it's not anymore. Why? It still exists, but it's not as violent. Like
because of developments.
Yeah, in the West,
society
that have nothing to do with the religion. Yes. So why can't Islam be the same? You're telling me that they're fundamentally different. Why?
The Reformation with the New Testament played a large role in
what are you talking about, dude? After the Reformation, there was still tons of fucking violence and tons of imperialism led by Christian nations. The Reformation had fuck all to do. It had nothing to do with making Christianity better, period. It had absolutely nothing to do. I don't know why people... No, don't say right, because you didn't even acknowledge that. What did you expect me to roll over when you said the Reformation? The Reformation of Christianity meant nothing. We have been becoming more secular in the West over the past 50, 100 years, more and more and more and more. There's never going to be a Reformation in the Catholic Church, for instance, that says that masturbation or sex before marriage is okay. That kind of a Reformation doesn't exist. It's just been slowly dying out.
So then, are you making the argument, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, are you making the argument then that because we've seen Christianity, I don't necessarily agree or disagree with this, for the record, but because Christianity we saw in history sort of reform itself by means of society, which took a very, very long time, and we saw a lot of violence before we got to that point, then we should let Islam do the same thing, that we should let it follow the same path if we can instead use, by means of policy or
what policy?
Or just general perception.
General perception, what?
I told you I'm not a policymaker, but
yeah, you haven't given me a single example. I'm just curious what you mean when you say that. Like
I gave you an example of general perception,
which is calling them extremists.
Can you recite to me what I told you?
Yeah, you said that if you people on the left can just acknowledge Islam for being a bad religion, then what? It magically changes? I'm pretty sure those were pretty much your exact words.
I said most, and yes, that it. Believe it or not, it does. This is like day one sociology, man. If
This
the
is day
perception
in
of something
sociology in day one. You would say that if everybody calls something bad, everybody is gonna, and their religious convictions are gonna change. You realize that
that's not what I just
people
said.
literally
Why
die
do you
for their
keep putting words
religion.
in my mouth?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
go
never
ahead.
said anything about magic. I never said, right? I said,
Okay.
yes, this is day one sociology, that the perception of something really, really makes a difference. I think you just had a video on psychology, right? Your surroundings affecting your beliefs and wanting to kind of fit in. All of this plays a role. There's so many different variables in this, right? And first of
Yes,
all,
I agree. That's my argument, though. You can't use that. You're saying that there is only one thing that matters, and that is their religion. I'm the one saying that there are a ton of variables that determine how people act, and that religion...
You misunderstood me. What I mean is that the religion itself, if the religion were to change, there's a lot of variables that are involved. I'm not saying there's a lot of variables that
If there are
involved
3
in that
million
religion forming
peaceful...
the actual violence.
If there are 3 million peaceful Muslims living in the United States right now, why can't we just continue to do our thing in the West, become more cultured, become more civilized, become more secular, and just carry on that path? Because it doesn't
If there
seem...
were 3 million, I'm sorry, say that again.
There are 3 million peaceful Muslims living today in the United States. Why can't we just carry on being civilized in the West and moving in that direction? I don't see Islamic extremism growing massively in the United States or any signs of that happening. So I don't know why we can't just continue moving in a more secular direction.
First of all, I don't necessarily disagree with that. But what I'm saying is,
Wait, but you
sort of-
are. You specifically said that we need to enact specific policy in order to stop these people and call Islam bad. You are saying
If
we
that
need to
was
do
our
something.
goal, yes, that is what we would need to do. That's the point I was making. I wasn't saying that we necessarily should go in that direction, but if we were to do it, then yeah, first and foremost.
Wait, so which direction should we go in?
Before any policy or anything of the like, I think we should move in a generally more secular. Not policy. I keep thinking policy because he kept repeating that.
Well, because policy would
so
actually force you to give you
understand.
an actual answer and to give an actual... So like when I talk about economic policy or education policy or healthcare policy, that forces you to have an actual prepared answer and not just random bullshit conjecture that can't really be proven or disproven and just lends itself to a bunch of people getting around, getting stoned and having a conversation about nothing. I'm sorry. That seems why you keep avoiding the policy thing, because you have no real ideas or input on any of this stuff. You just kind of want to talk in vague, if we just kind of call
trying
it
to
a
pick
bad
my words.
thing, then we can kind of, move around and maybe people will be less Islamic and,
Are you saying that wouldn't be the case?
I'm saying that I don't know what you're talking. You're not really having, I'm saying right now that you are not having a real conversation. That you sound like somebody that is completely ill-prepared to have this conversation. I don't think you realize the strategic importance of Syria to Russia. I don't think you have any idea what goes on in the Middle East whatsoever. I don't think you even know what really goes on in the Western world. You've challenged me to provide you 5 things that were more of a threat to the United States than Islamic radical terrorism, and I did in an instant. And I even told you how Christians were more of a threat in each of these things because you couldn't name a single way that Islam negatively impacted any of these 5 things. And now you just keep bouncing around these really fucking vague things like, if we just call all Islam bad, then... And you even went as far as that, you can find direct ties to the Quran for what Islam is doing now. And I asked you, what do you mean? Is there suicide bomb? You go, no, they're supposed to kill infidels. And I say, you did that in the Old Testament. And you're like, I don't know. I mean, that doesn't really count. It's like, I don't know. I don't know what this conversation is about.
Well, so something you have a tendency of doing is what you just did right now is you brought up many different things which had many different assumptions that were, if we were to go off of that, we would assume all of those things.
So
were the
what
case.
what I just did is called gish
disingenuous.
galloping. If you're talking about gish galloping, you could argue that that's what I did, but that's not. I was summarizing our conversation. I'm not trying to gish gallop you. We did talk about all of those things. Did I
maybe
summarize?
You don't see it like that, but
I don't see it like because that's the conversation that we had.
No, I'm not satisfied with the summary you gave.
Can you? Okay, I'm sorry. So can you give me a part of that you disagree?
You gave.
Okay, what was one of the conclusions that I gave that you disagree with?
You had said that the 5 different things that you asked me to name that I was
are more important than Islamic. Yeah.
That was never an argument that I made. If you were to look back at this video, I never said that.
You literally challenged me to name it. You said that I couldn't even name 5. You literally. That's why I have this notepad sitting in front of me and I named it. So I named 5.
Yes.
You're telling me that you didn't challenge me to do that?
Okay, hold on. Let's go over this point, right? I asked you to name 5 things that are more important than Islam. As a rebuttal, you named 5 things, or I think you named 4, but you named 5 things, let's say, and you asked me to name how Islam affects those things specifically.
No, I said how it
whether or
affected.
not Islam.
No, I had said how is it worse of a threat than any of these things? We can go through one by one, and then you said,
and I gave you an answer for that you didn't accept.
What was your answer?
That an ideology. I gave you the toxic ideology answer.
So you gave me a non-answer. Like if we were stoner bros, you'd be like, oh, dude, you gave me a non-answer.
Why is that a non-answer?
Because it's nothing. You're just giving me random, pointless bullshit conjecture. Like, oh, well, bad ideology is a bad thing. Like, there's millions of fucking bad ideologies that exist fucking everywhere. Some of them are very pervasive in American fucking culture. Obesity is a fucking ideology, and that's killing fucking hundreds of thousands of people a year through heart disease and shit. Gun culture is a bad ideology in the United States that kills over 30,000 people a year. Our reckless driving habits are a toxic ideology that kill over 60,000 people a year. And you want to talk about Islamic extremism that's killed 2,500 people since 2000? Like...
Yes. Yeah, no, I do. I'm thinking. What I'm saying is, all of the things that you just named, I agree, are bad ideologies. Maybe even worse
but not
in terms of life.
Yeah, no, but not maybe worse, but definitely worse. These are all more threatening, and that was just off the top of my head.
All arguable.
Okay, then argue. Then give me what is Islam. What on those lists that I just named is less threatening? Just give me one thing that's less threatening than Islamic extremism.
Settle down, but. I'm not going to go over any of those things. But what I'm saying is, I'll concede that point. I'm not necessarily saying that. That's the case and that's what I believe, but sure, you can make the case, for example, that reckless driving, I'm not sure what number you just threw out, but whatever number, like let's say it's 200 times or 300 times or 500 times, whatever the hell you want to say, more deadly than Islam, or sorry, than Islam extremism. For citizens living in the United States specifically, right? Now, what I would say in response to that is Islamic extremism, that ideology specifically, the lack thereof would provide benefits in all the categories you just named, including reckless driving. That more
and then I would ask you, how does Islamic extremism ideology impact our reckless driving culture or our gun culture or education or in the United States? In any way, just name one way.
Just simplify enough to benefit for you to be satisfied.
No, I just asked you for one example. You can't give it to me because it doesn't exist. You know it.
Explain to me. Okay, settle down. But explain to me how an example, how I would be able to give any example, right, of any ideology that would affect reckless driving that you would not consider a non-answer, and then maybe I'll be able to give you an example.
If it actually does affect, I can give you tons. The problem is I can do this from my side, right? Here's our American exceptionalist ideology that gives us this fascination with deregulating everything could contribute to bad driving culture. And how can you support that argument, Destiny? How does that ideology contribute to that? Well, the fact that our licensing process is done on a state-by-state basis, and the licensing process is very subpar compared to European countries, and the fact that you can draw direct correlations with the lack of driver training versus the accidents that happens in states is a very good example of that. Wow, thank you, Destiny. You just provided a way in which an ideology manifests itself in a negative way that can be measured directly and has a direct negative impact. There's my example. Now, can you give me an example? So let me give you an example. Let's say that you had a city. It is a direct impact. How is it not a direct impact?
The wrong use of the word, because an example I would give in that same respect, you would call an indirect effect.
I wouldn't, though. You haven't given me anything.
I would.
Listen, okay, let's say that there was a city, okay? And you found out that Muslim women were getting in increasingly more accidents. And the reason was because their fucking hijab or whatever the fuck on their head made it so that when they turned their heads, they weren't able to see out their mirrors. This is Islamic extremism contributing to accidents in the United States. Then I would go, oh shit, you're right. This is actually really bad, right? Or let's say...
Oh, you're giving really, really silly examples.
I'm giving silly examples because you don't have any good ones. Can you give me a good example?
In order to satisfy you, I would have to give you an example that would directly reduce the amount that you would be able to see a direct reduction in the amount of, say, vehicle accidents in a paradigm shift through Islamic extremism as a whole. And obviously that's impossible to ask. That's not a question. This is a question about philosophy. This isn't a question about direct, tangible impact. That's never what I claim to have.
Oh,
When
okay. Well, when I'm
trace my
talking
initial-
about what is a threat to the United States, I'm talking about direct, tangible impact, because these are the conversations that are important to America today, not random meanderings about the possible philosophical
disagree.
implications. Okay, if you do, I don't know. How do you disagree? So you think it's more important to talk about the philosophy of Islam than talking about our underemployment numbers, or talking about our low median wages, or the fact that even though GDP rises, GDP per capita is not staying on track? Or how is it more important?
Well, first of all, economists are going to talk about the employment rates. The different sectors are going to talk about their own specific fields. That's I'm not sure what you're getting at there, but yeah, I think this has just as much not requirement, but should have just as much incentive to be discussed and to try and make changes. The point that I was refuting that you made initially was that Islamic extremism does not affect the United States, and it should not be something